Hi, this is James Cook, Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Maine at Augusta. And I'm shooting this video to talk about the game plan for our fall 2023 Introduction to Sociology course. Sociology is the study of social structure. Now that turns out to be a circular definition because sociology is, of course, the study of social things. The root soc is contained in both. So what is social? It is a context of a pattern of relationships and affiliations that occur both between individuals and within these higher order entities that occur, such as groups and institutions and communities. And sociology is the study of how the pattern of relationships around individuals and including individuals and incorporating groups and institutions and communities create effects that have a profound impact on the fate of individuals, groups, institutions, and communities. So the first thing we're going to do to kind of give you a game plan in week 2 is to talk about this idea of social structure and to think about why sociology is different from, say, economics or psychology, very individual focused disciplines for the most part. And we're going to talk about some instances of social structure to give you something tangible to look at that you can see and that maybe you could touch and sense in other ways. Then in week 3, we're going to talk about sociological research. Sociology is a social science, which means, no, we're not a natural science in the sense that we don't observe chemicals, but we do observe different elements in interaction. And in doing so, we talk about variables, and we talk about cases, and we talk about data structures. So I'm going to show you what that's all about in week 3. Then in week 4, we're going to talk about culture, this thing that is carried over social structures and diffuses, moves through social structures, a set of values, beliefs, expectations, symbols that are shared and understood and reacted to by individuals through interaction in a social structure. How do people gain that understanding in the first place? How do they move from being born as biological members of Homo sapiens, the species of biological beings, to become humans, to become members of a society that shares a certain culture? Well, that process is called socialization, and it occurs from a young age, but it goes throughout our entire lives, and we'll cover that in week 5. In week 6, we're going to talk a little bit more formally about groups and organizations. What are these things that are larger than ourselves, that we are members of, become affiliated with, and what impact do they have on the lives of people? How do groups interact? And what kinds of groups and organizations are there out in the world? In week 7, we're going to talk about social networks, which are mathematical patterns, easy math though, really middle school to early high school math, to think about mathematical patterns of interaction there and how individual units there are affected by their location within that mathematical pattern. The impact of being a member of a group or being a member of a social network can be profound, and one of the impacts is conformity. This pressure that we feel under certain circumstances to conform ourselves to the expectations of others, to the orders of others, to the beliefs that are communicated through these networks and groups. Well, it turns out that there's systematic research that shows that conformity is not an ever-present feature of humanity as a social species, but rather varies, and it varies according to elements and arrangements of social structure. So it is sociological, and we'll talk about that in week 8. The flip side of conformity is deviance. What happens when people don't conform, when they innovate? Well, one form of deviance is innovation. Another form of it is something that we call crime. And an interesting feature of societies is this balance between social control social control on the one hand, and allowance for innovation on the other. So we'll consider that in week 9. Week 10, 11, and 12 are going to be focused on stratification, which is another form of social structure in which some individuals are located above others and some are located below others. In what? In access to power, in access to resources, and thereby ability to control the course and outcome of their own lives. Stratification occurs empirically speaking, that is, we can systematically observe stratification occurring for certain kinds of people in certain circumstances, particularly according to economic well-being or class. Second, according to this idea called race, and we'll talk about where that comes from. And third, according to this idea that we have a set of expectations, values, and beliefs, it's cultural, called gender, involving how certain kinds of people ought to behave, ought not to behave, and what kinds of lives they ought to hold. Clearly, conformity and deviance are relevant to all 3 of those weeks. We'll finish out the course in week 14 by thinking about demography, which is the sociology of simply counting how many people exist and thinking about the implications of that. And then in week 15, we're going to turn in on ourselves and think about the idea and process of education as itself filled with social structures that impact the meaning and experience and outcome of the educational process. That's our course. And I hope that this summary helps give you an idea of not just where we're starting from, but where we're headed.